You hear it before you see it. The hush of the southern wind brushing over stone walls. A church bell tolls in the distance, sharp, solitary, echoing through a city that knows what's coming. Toulouse, spring, 721 AD. Beneath the early morning mist, farmers kneel at the gates with their faces to the ground, praying not for victory, but for survival. To the south, the land boils with dust and movement. An army unlike anything Christendom has seen. Crescent banners, Arabian horses, horns that do not sound like the Frankish ones. They have crossed the Pyrenees with ruthless discipline, razing towns and silencing strongholds. Now they march with terrifying purpose on this final jewel. Toulouse, the heart of Aquitaine. At their head rides Al-Sam ibn Malik al-Khawlani, Wali of Al-Andalus. Calm, calculating, dressed not in flamboyant silks, but in practical war robes. His eyes do not flicker with anger, only mathematics. He is here not simply to win, but to install. The Umayyad Caliphate has already taken Iberia with shocking ease. Now they want permanence in Gaul. Toulouse, it is to be their bastion, a launchpad from which all of Francia might fall. But behind the walls of Toulouse stands a man who has made peace with impossible odds. Odo the Great, Duke of Aquitaine. Some call him barbarian, others liberator. The church regards him as unpredictable. Charles Martel considers him a rival. But here, Odo is more than a duke. He is the line between survival and annihilation. He surveys the walls, Roman masonry, ancient and tired, now reinforced with fresh timber and packed earth. The air stinks of wet stone, unwashed bodies, burning oil. Every craftsman has become a builder, every monk a watchman, every child an echo of their mother's fear. Odo's commands are clear, no one is idle. Bakers shape loaves for soldiers, blacksmiths sharpen scythes into weapons, priests carry water buckets up ladders. He does not hide the truth. If Toulouse falls, Aquitaine dies. The Umayyads arrive like thunder. Their vanguard flows over the hills and plains like ink spilled on parchment. Their tents rise in coordinated lines, white and red banners snapping in the wind. Al-Sam does not waste time. As noted by Arab chroniclers like Ibn al-Athir and Ibn Hayyan, his siege protocol was swift and fearsome. Mangonels, torsion catapults, and siege towers are constructed with bewildering speed. Syrian engineers direct formations as if drawing lines on a map. Frankish sources claim Al-Sam commanded up to 70,000 men, though modern historians like Hugh Kennedy suggest a more conservative estimate of 25,000 to 40,000. Odo's defenders, perhaps 15,000 at best, and many of them commoners. But Toulouse holds. Day after day, stone screams against stone. Flaming pots arc over battlements. Oil boils. Children cry beneath the chapel vaults. The Umayyads expect panic. Instead, they find calculation. Odo has no illusions. He does not charge blindly into glory. He watches. He measures. He prepares the city not just to survive, but to bleed the enemy. Al-Sam grows frustrated. In his war council, he speaks few words but draws many lines. He shifts the angle of bombardment, orders trenches dug, threatens defectors. Yet every morning, the same white cross flies above Toulouse's tower. Inside the city, Odo is everywhere. He walks the ramparts, checking each post. He touches the shoulders of boys holding spears too heavy for their arms. He nods silently to widows boiling pitch. His presence, unshaken, silent, calm, becomes a strange comfort. Men fight harder when they feel watched by someone who does not flinch. Week 2. A breach. The outer gate falls with a shriek of splinters. Arab cavalry rush the opening. Inside, militia draw them into narrow alleys pre-filled with traps. Boiling oil, taut ropes, spears jab from hidden slits in wooden panels. As reported in Arab sources later, the enemy fought like beasts caged, lashing at walls that would not break. And still, Toulouse holds. But the noose tightens. Supplies dwindle. Rats become meat. Disease flickers in crowded corners of churches now turn to infirmaries. Morale sinks into mud. Yet Odo says nothing. He knows words can shatter hope more than silence. At night, he sends riders, boys with short bows and no armor. They slip through enemy lines, whispering through the trees, hoping Frankish outposts hear their pleas. Al-Sam, meanwhile, grows overconfident. He orders construction of a new siege tower, twice the height, reinforced, painted with the green of the caliphate. As Peter Jackson noted in his works on early Islamic warfare, siege psychology often determined the outcome before the walls fell. Al-Sam believed the sight of it would shatter Toulouse. But it doesn't. Odo doesn't even look at it. Instead, he counts the days. He knows what Al-Sam does not. His own reinforcements have begun marching from the north, gathering beyond the Garonne River. He just needs more time. The 35th day dawns humid and strange. The wind carries the scent of horses, many horses, from the north, and then the horns. But they are not the enemies. The horns echo like thunder across the hills. 3 short blasts, close, urgent, unmistakably Frankish. From the northern tree line, riders emerge, first a dozen, then hundreds, banners flaring against the dawn. Dust rises in waves behind them, not a relief force from Charles Martel as some had hoped, but Odo's own hidden reserve, assembled in secret, trained in silence, led by captains who had vanished from Toulouse weeks before under cover of night. Al-Sam turns to face them from atop a siege tower still under construction. His face does not show fear, but his fingers clench the rail. He knows he has been outmaneuvered. His entire army, thousands strong, now stretches in a crescent around the southern and western sides of the city. The newly arriving force, mounted and swift, barrels down from the north, aiming directly for the exposed rear of his camp. Odo sees them too. For the first time in over a month, he speaks publicly from the walls. His voice is hoarse but clear. Hold the line. When they strike, we strike. Inside the city, cheers ripple like fire through dry grass. Hope surges, but discipline remains. The defenders do not charge. Odo knows the timing must be perfect. He waits for the enemy to panic, and panic they do. The Umayyad rear guard, smaller, thinner, comprised mostly of supply staff and unarmored auxiliaries, crumbles under the surprise assault. Tents burn, camels scream. Arab commanders scramble to regroup. Orders are shouted, but drowned in chaos. Horses trample over crates of dried dates and sacks of grain. Siege engines, half assembled, are overturned and ignited. It is exactly what Odo needed. He raises his hand. A flaming arrow is loosed. It arcs in silence over the walls, trailing smoke. It lands at the feet of his waiting troops. The gates swing open, and Toulouse erupts. From the front, the city disgorges defenders, bloodied, starved, eyes blazing. From the rear, Odo's cavalry cuts through the disorganized Umayyads like a blade through parchment. The enemy is caught in a vice of flesh and fury. This is not a traditional battle. It is a collapse, a breaking, a long-suppressed scream turned into steel. Arab chroniclers would later admit that the force of Odo's counterattack was like the sea breaking through a dam. Historians like David Nicole and Hugh Kennedy suggest this was one of the earliest examples of a double envelopment maneuver by European commanders in the early medieval period. A feat of strategy, not just desperation. At the center of the storm, Odo rides, not in golden armor or priestly robes, but in dented chainmail patched with boiled leather. He carries no plume, no ornate crest, only a sword blackened with soot and years of battle. His horse is lean, its ribs showing, but it moves like lightning. He slashes through enemy lines with precision, not glory. He shouts commands in Gascon, Frankish, and Latin, each to different clusters of soldiers. His memory of the battlefield is terrifyingly complete. He remembers where each siege tower stands, where the hidden trenches lie. He fights with a general's brain and a soldier's wrath. Al-Sam realizes the trap far too late. He tries to rally a central position near the siege towers. He orders the infantry to pivot, form a wedge, push toward the river. But the ground is soft from spring rains. The heavy cavalry meant to lead the breakout becomes mired in mud. A riderless horse crashes into a supply cart, igniting spilled oil. One by one, command posts fall silent. Drummers are cut down. Horn blowers drop their instruments. The army is no longer an army. It is a crowd, and crowds do not win battles. The retreat becomes a rout. Odo does not pursue them far. He knows the dangers of overextension. His men, after all, are still recovering from starvation. Instead, he sends light cavalry to harass the retreating flanks while the main body holds. The Umayyads flee south, broken, their banners trampled beneath Toulouse's boots, and then the silence returns. But it is not the same silence as before. It is heavier. Inside the walls, they do not cheer at first. Many do not understand what has just happened. Some fear another trap. Others simply cannot comprehend the idea of victory after so many days of death. Odo rides through the gates as slowly as he left them. He does not raise his sword. He does not smile. He dismounts and kneels in front of the cathedral steps. Mud covers his armor. Blood, some of it his, drips from his chin. A monk approaches and says nothing, just hands him a bowl of water. Odo drinks, then pours the rest over his head. Only then does he speak. Tell them, it is over. A cheer breaks, then another, then 1,000. Toulouse does not merely survive. It defeats one of the greatest invading forces the region had ever known. The first major setback for the Umayyad expansion into Western Europe. It would take another decade before Charles Martel's victory at Tours cemented the Christian defensive myth. But here, at Toulouse, the tide first turned. As John Keegan later observed in his study of early medieval warfare, the victories that shape empires are often remembered. But the ones that save them? Those happen quietly on mornings like this. The battlefield does not settle quickly. The air is thick with fire smoke and the stench of rotting food, spilled blood and burning cloth. A storm of shouting still hangs in the air. The Umayyads do not retreat in unison. They splinter, faction by faction, some abandoning their banners, others trying to regroup under isolated commanders now cut off from the chain of command. The ground is chaos. Horses scream, men crawl, and arrows rain indiscriminately as both armies clash with no clean front line. This is no longer a siege. It is an unmaking. Inside the city, the walls are empty. Every able body is on the field now. Archers, who once guarded the towers, now wade into the fray with hunting knives and rusted spears. Monks carry buckets of water to douse fires consuming the siege towers, only to find themselves pulling wounded men from beneath collapsed woodwork. Teenagers who'd never seen death before now choke on the steam, rising from split bellies and shattered helmets. And Odo? He is everywhere at once. Mounted at the center, directing from horseback, he senses the exact moment when the enemy tries to regroup near the southern hillocks. Al-Sam, bloodied but unbroken, has drawn together his core infantry. Berbers and Syrians trained in desert warfare, disciplined and unafraid of death. Their shields interlock, forming a rough half-circle, bracing for the final charge. A standard bearing the kalima still flies above them. But Odo doesn't charge. He dismounts. He walks forward slowly, not alone, but without his vanguard. The ground crunches beneath his boots. He halts within bow range. The Umayyads watch him, tense, arrows notched, waiting. He raises one hand. It's not a signal for war, but for recognition. The two commanders lock eyes. Al-Sam, lips cracked with thirst, hair soaked in blood and sweat, straightens in the saddle. His horse trembles beneath him. Odo does not speak, neither does Al-Sam, but in that moment there is understanding. This battle is over. A final charge would be suicide for both sides, and so Al-Sam does the only thing left to him. He orders a retreat. It is not clean. The southern forces attempt to pull away in waves, some succeeding, many not. Rearguard skirmishes turn into massacres. Those who cannot flee burn their supplies and set fire to siege towers still within reach. Their goal is to deny Toulouse any further advantage. But even as they flee, even as the banners vanish over the horizon, Toulouse does not celebrate with excess. The people know this is no divine miracle. They know that this was not won with heaven's favor, but with human suffering. The victory is real, but it has a weight. That evening, rain begins to fall. Light at first, then harder. Soldiers wash themselves in the downpour, wiping grime and blood from their faces with the same hands they used to kill. The cathedral bells ring, not to signal triumph, but mourning. In the rubble outside the gates, Odo stands beneath the storm. A priest places a cloak over his shoulders. He shrugs it off. "I want to feel the rain," he mutters, more to himself than to anyone nearby. A captain approaches. "My lord," the people ask, "do we chase them?" Odo turns, and for a moment his face is unreadable. Then he shakes his head. "No, they've bled enough, so have we." The bodies are counted by torchlight. Some estimates say over 10,000 Umayyads perished, though historians like Peter Jackson argue the number is likely closer to 6,000, with thousands more wounded or captured. Odo's side fares little better. Nearly a third of his standing army is gone, not to mention dozens of civilians who took up arms. The field is quiet now, except for the sound of carts creaking under the weight of the dead. A strange silence settles over the land in the weeks that follow. No vengeance campaign, no counter-invasion. It is as if both empires hold their breath. In Cordoba, the news spreads slowly, clouded by shame. Al-Sam, grievously wounded during the retreat, dies in Narbonne months later. His death is recorded in both Arab and Frankish sources, not as a coward's fall, but as the death of a commander undone by an unexpected storm of resistance. The fields outside Toulouse took months to clear, not just of bodies, but of what the bodies meant. Burned siege towers were pulled apart beam by beam. Trenches were filled in. Blood seeped into the roots of olive trees. There were no victory monuments, no medals, only rows of wooden markers for men whose names would not be remembered. Sons of farmers, monks with broken hands, street boys who died with kitchen knives in their chests. Inside the city, life resumed unevenly. Trade wagons returned, the churches reopened, but everything felt slower. The women sang quieter hymns, the children played more cautiously. The people of Toulouse did not celebrate as though they had triumphed. They moved as if they had been spared. Duke Odo refused any feast in his honor. When the bishop insisted, Odo stood up midway through the service, walked out of the cathedral, and never spoke of the battle in public again. He spent the next year traveling his duchy, not to boast, but to rebuild. Barns were restocked, tools were smithed, orphans were taken in by monasteries. And when people tried to kneel before him, he stopped them. "I did not save you," he once said in a village square. "You saved you. I was only a witness." Yet even as Toulouse began to heal, the world outside stirred in different ways. In Cordoba, Al-Sam's death left a vacuum of authority. The caliphate did not collapse, far from it, but it no longer looked northward with the same hunger. Confidence was cracked. As Ibn al-Athir would later write, the sword was still sharp, but the hand that held it now remembered pain. The Christian kingdoms too responded. Charles Martel, ever watchful of Odo, saw the victory not as a cause for celebration, but as a warning. If Aquitaine could resist the caliphate alone, it could one day resist him. Their alliance, born years later, was built not on friendship, but on necessity. Still, modern historians like Dan Jones argue that, without Odo's stand at Toulouse, the entire Franco-Islamic frontier might have looked different. If the Umayyads had secured a base there, their campaigns could have pushed deeper into central Gaul long before Tours. The famous stand of Charles Martel in 732 might never have happened, or might have come too late. But history rarely unfolds with clarity in the moment. To the people of 721, Toulouse was not the first crack in an empire. It was simply a place where time bent and held. The long-term consequences were quiet. The Umayyads turned inward, reinforcing their Iberian cities, solidifying administrative control, building infrastructure. They did not forget Gaul, but they learned to be cautious. It would take nearly a decade before another major offensive was launched, and even then, it would end in defeat. Odo lived to see all of this, but he never returned to the battlefield. He ruled Aquitaine for another decade, fending off internal threats, forging uneasy alliances. His relationship with the Franks remained tense, but no war broke out. He spent his final years writing letters to monasteries, supporting literacy, and urging future generations, not to chase glory, but to build peace. There is no record of a grand tomb, no statue, no knightly order in his name. His legacy, instead, is in the silence that comes when a city does not fall. Toulouse today remembers him in stone reliefs. A mural in a hidden chapel shows him not as a warrior, but as a tired man leaning on a broken sword. He does not look victorious. He looks relieved. And perhaps that's what victory really was. As John Keegan observed in his meditations on warfare, the most powerful battles are not always those that conquer, but those that prevent. Toulouse prevented. It prevented collapse. It prevented a domino chain of sieges and sackings across southern France. It prevented the kind of momentum that only empires understand, the slow, thundering inertia that crushes city after city until resistance feels like myth. The siege is still left out of many history books, overshadowed by tours, lost beneath layers of time and nationalism. But for those who study the shadows of turning points, Toulouse is not a footnote. It is a hinge, a breath that interrupted history's sentence and made it pause. The people who survived it are long dead. Their bones rest beneath churches, under vineyards, in unmarked corners of old streets. But in the stones of the city wall, you can still see impact scars, rounded craters where mangonel stones struck, blackened seams where fire licked. They remain quiet, much like the victory itself. There is a final moment sometimes imagined by historians and poets alike, the day after the battle, before the burials, before the priests returned, before the markets reopened. Odo stands at the edge of the battlefield alone, watching smoke rise over the hills. He says nothing. He carries no banner, and as the wind rises behind him, he whispers, not to his men, not to his enemies, but to the land itself, you do not belong to them. And for another generation at least, the land listened. In Toulouse, Odo returns not as a king, but as something stranger, a survivor of the impossible. The church does not embrace him fully. Charles Martel does not praise him publicly, but in Aquitaine, his name becomes something whispered with reverence, like a prayer. Yet Odo himself does not speak of glory, not in his letters, not in his decrees, not to his soldiers. When asked years later what won the battle, he said only, "We did not choose to be heroes. We simply refused to vanish." As David Morgan would later write in his study of frontier warfare, empires expand like wildfires, but sometimes even the fiercest blaze breaks against a single stone. Toulouse was that stone.